Hello. So, today I'm going to talk about something again. I'm going to talk about one minor thing that happened to me and three major things that are interlinked that happened to me, courtesy of Asian parents. And these are more or less like communicative issues. And I know there are tons more crazy Asian parents out there. And mine is more or less like emotional, actually. And this is going to kind of focus on communicative issues and basically how I was treated in a way. So, university. Okay, the first minor one, if you will, and this will kind of set the tone of how my parents actually talk to me and communicate to me. That makes me such a timid little shit that I am, right? Like uncommunicative, like not confident bitch that I am. And hopefully this will kind of paint a bit on why. I don't know, man. So the first minor thing that happened to me that I can remember, not can, but what comes to mind right now was when I was like 20 or 21, when I was being escorted by my dad to go to this university in the capital of my country. So I kind of went there, you know. I went there and with my father, and all along the fucking journey, he has this sort of tone that I think a lot of Asian kids and Asian offsprings, wherever you are, will kind of understand, where they kind of sound like pissed off all the time. Do you have those? Like, and they're trying to like dispense their advice to you, but with this tone, like they're berating or scolding you, you know? And it happened all throughout the few day journey, where it's like, you gotta be tough. Did you hear me? Huh? And all that crap, right? And I remember two particular memories in my head is that we're on a taxi and we're supposed to get to this location, but we kind of passed it, right? And I remember just looking out and seeing the building. And I'm normally directionally blind, so when I see it, I'm like, "Oh, we're going past it. Oh, what the hell?" And my father immediately kind of just exploded, like kind of like that low threatening voice where he said like, "Don't say what the hell to me." I'm like, in my head, I wasn't even saying it to him, but at that moment, a little bit of anger was starting to boil in my heart, right? And this is kind of like a thing that I'm kind of oddly satisfied or happy about. So what happened was, as it got to the night, we kind of stayed in some kind of cheap motel or something, and we're sleeping in our, laying down in our respective beds in the dark, and my father started to dispense his, you know, advice again, but again in the same fucking tone, like, you have to be tough, you have to be tough, do you listen to me? Like, do you hear me, huh? And then he's starting to say, like, you have to be independent. Do you understand what I'm saying, huh? And he keeps doing this all the damn, like, it's not even a conversation because conversations are supposed to be two-way, and he just keeps doing this. And all I could say was just, oh, yes, hmm. And when he said, like, you gotta be independent, huh, 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 he keeps saying these things, and I was getting a bit more and more angry. Because you have to understand, and this happens in a lot of stereotypical Asian parent, household, is that all throughout your life, during your formative years before university, all you're pretty much allowed to do is studying. I'm sorry. And some of you, and a lot of you, might even be kind of limited or banned even from hanging out with your friends after school or kind of like socializing time. There's not even that. And all you have is school, 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 and more school, and after school, perhaps they might even pay for tuition classes that you didn't ask for, then that you have to go to, right? And suddenly, at this moment in time after school, because I kind of dropped from an A student to a pretty low grade up to that point, that finally I was going to university and start over in a way, and perhaps it's frustrated. I don't know, man. But the point is, after all that experience, quote unquote, from your formative years, suddenly he was lying in that bed berating me that I needed to make connections, make friends. I needed to be independent. I have to be tough, whatever fuck that means. I had to be whatever. Because up to that point, I'm not a fighter in the way that, some people rebel and some people like get into yelling matches with their parents and all that. I actually tried to obey, and instead of defiance, I actually like retreated more and more into myself and kind of have this avoidance attitude almost too. But basically, again, why did I just go to that point? But again, all throughout your life, you've been trained a certain way, and suddenly you've been scolded to act entirely in the other. And when he got to another point, like when he got to the point where I remember he said, "You gotta be independent. Did you listen to me? Did you hear me? Huh?" Stuff like that. It, for once in my life, I don't know what happened, but that anger just boiled over. And I'm not that kind of person, but the anger just boiled over. And I'm like, why is it? What did I say? I think, why is it? Do you always sound like you're scolding me? And this was what I actually said. Like, that is like a death sentence when you try to like talk back to your parents as an Asian, right? But I actually kind of like had this a bit of a snappy tone in my voice because I was genuinely like angry, And of course, all that I've done, the exposition about how, past life, like your formative years experience in a way, and suddenly they demand you to act another and being so rude and disrespectful about it, blah blah blah. He probably never thought about that. He probably doesn't even know. And I get just snapped back at him in a way, politely, I hope, to say that why is it every time you talk to me saying um, I think it's as simple as that. Why do you always sound like you're angry with me or taking this angry tone at me all the damn time, basically? And what's a bit so sadly funny about this is that you can 100% detect that he actually was taken aback. Because for a hot 10 seconds, or maybe it was not that long, but for a hot few seconds, he actually was stunned. Like you can hear the silence in the room, right? In the dark, damn, like it's a in the damn dark room. You can just hear it. You can just, well, hear nothing, right? For maybe 3 or 4 seconds. And then he he kind of went back into this like authoritative tone, which kind of failed because you can kind of hear the quiver in his voice. But Asian parents, they don't apologize really. They only double down most of the time. So he's like, "Because I care for you," and that was what he said. And this is kind of how they talk to me a lot of the time, right? And when you think about it, when I think about it, I keep retreating more and more and not talk more and more. Exactly because all they have for me is berating and not much talking, you know. And that's just how I dealt with it. Some people may yell back, some people might fight their parents, but not me, you know? And that's the minor story. Now, the second story, which would be the first of three major stories, they're interconnected, right? And this is kind of like what they say to me that made my confidence and self-worth just drop. And it's almost like something that I cannot control, you know. I had described it to someone once that it's like what you do with he's preparing some meat, right? So I'm telling him it's like this meat. You're kind of like pouring a bit of salt and flavoring upon it. And when that flavoring seeps in, you can't really separate the salt from the meat anymore. So it's like it's marinated into your being, right? At least that is what's for me. I'm not trying to get all dramatic or poetic about it, but that's the analogy I would pull, right? Where they say something to me that really bogs down my spirit, my soul, my self-worth, and eventually, I can't really even control it. It's just there, you know. Now the first story I will kind of dispense to you is the thief story. Excuse me. So, what happened was that I'm in a foreign country. They're paying for my rent and all that until I get a job, which I tried so hard to do. And I have to kind of admit to myself and accept that back then, still, I had such little self confidence and self worth, courtesy to them in a way. And I know as an adult, it's hard to gain any sympathy or empathy when you say that because it almost sounds like, oh, you're blaming your parents. Oh. But again, I was already so bogged down by the lack of confidence, lack of self worth. I self sabotage in interviews. It's just painful when I actually think back to it. But this is what happened one time when I'm in this foreign country, which I still am now. Not very long, but hey. So what happened was that I'm still alone in here. I'm I'm kind of comfy with not having friends, because of all throughout your life you're kind of not allowed to hang out and socialize. So you kind of make do and kind of like train yourself to be comfortable in another way, So I trained myself to be comfortable without friends. And then there's also like people know me as a good person, but I can't really like have any friends, But that's just how, I dealt with it when I was younger and it kind of carried over to adulthood. So I'm kind of alone in this country, point being, right? I have no emotional support, not that I really need it. Honestly, all I need was just a bit of emotional support, and the very least, not what's ever opposite of emotional support. Just don't trash me for no fucking like. Either way, Asian parents will kind of call their children to check up on them to kind of like, have them update them and talk about any gossip and shit. So what happened was that I had this shady sort of housemate, and we're getting along fine. He does his own thing. I'm doing mine. I don't even communicate with him much. And one day he just comes out of his fucking room and just points at me. You better return the speaker that, before I call the police or before I, whatever. He just came out of his room, pointed at me, and just started to, you know, accuse me of stealing his speaker, which again he blasts throughout the night, and is just so disrespectful about it. But I didn't steal his shit. Honestly, inside I was, kind of a bit happy that it was gone. But I didn't steal his shit, and I talked with him about it. I'm like, I didn't do it or something. But The first time he accused me, he kind of just accused me and didn't even gave me a chance to say anything in edgewise, and he just stomped back into his room, which was weird. And then, of course, Asian parents called in. And at this time, I was still a bit in communication with them, and I still picked up their calls. And I guess this three-part story is going to be why I don't even call back anymore or listen to their voice anymore, right? So to continue the story, they called me and I picked up, and again the update kind of session happens. I kind of talk about this thing to them, right? And immediately you can kind of like it's almost like they perked up because of this juicy gossip, as the folks nowadays online kind of say, "Ooh, they perked up because of this juicy tea." Whatever. I don't know where that came from, but and they kind of started to chime in very unhelpful shit. My mother actually gleefully said, "He's accusing you of stealing his shit because you dress like shit." And I blinked twice. I'm kind of like, what? You know? And all throughout this time, maybe I don't dress as well as I need to back at home with them or something. They always try to chime in saying you're not getting a job because your hair is messy. You're not getting a job because you don't, you know, dress nice, you don't act good or something. And finally, when this happened, where this obviously problematic, housemate accused me of something, apparently it's my fault that I get blamed for petty theft because I dress like crap in the own humble abode that I'm living in. Not workplace, not a funeral, not a birthday. In the house I'm living in. Some people come out with their fucking boxers, man. And for a long while, and you might get angry and frustrated at me for this, but for a long fucking while, this fucked me up for a long fucking while. Because, fuck, it was almost like, how, let's say you can take a punch to the gut, but if you're like repeatedly taking punches to the gut, there's going to be one sort of threshold that you can't, like, that one punch, that one time will kind of send you like reeling and all that when it happens enough times. And that's what it felt like for me. And it was just words. Words. And that's what made it so frustrating sometimes, because they're just words. The second story out of the three-part story is that, again, it's something that's said to me over the phone. Now, Western countries, they can be kind of free, aka, gay marriage is a thing, even polyamorous relationship is a thing. Just, and in general, when you kind of communicate that, hey, I'm into you, that can get kind of direct, I guess. Plus, what was happening was that I had to move house and I didn't have a car. I'm kind of wimpy. I have so much stuff. And this guy in the same house, kind of had this. How do I say this? This guy in the same house as me was about to move out as well. And so I kind of introduced him to this new house because there's an extra room in that house as well. So what happened was that he found that the second house, which I was about to live in, is favorable. So he's about to move in too. So at So since we're moving at the same time, the same place, he offered to drive my stuff over, which I appreciate. So while he's driving the stuff over and I was in his car and all that, we kind of talked. And in an Asian sort of culture, there's always talk about don't owe anyone anything. If you have a debt, pay back like as soon as possible, blah blah blah. So he was helping me, and when I was in his car, I kind of talk about, hey, let me treat you to dinner or something, let me treat you with something, let me pay you something. I even offered him a bit of money. I offered him some cash and offered to kind of like just treat him to a meal. And what happened was that he just declined all of them. And that always never sat well with me because I don't like free. Again, it's like an ingrained sort of virtue within me that I have to give back something. But eventually what happened was that it got 0 to 100 really quick, where one day he tried to barge into my room, which he did, and for some reason or another, he thought he was going to have sexy time with me. And what saved me was a lot of shit was still on my bed, you know. Uh, I don't know why he thought he could do it, but it freaked me out a little bit, right? And when my parents called me, and they were already kind of like being nasty about the whole job thing. So when I told them about this incident, they immediately perked up again. And what I think I can't really forgive, in a way, not really something to forgive, but something that haunts me still is that, again, they have this berating tone of voice. Aside from, are you okay? Like they'll just berate me, like, why are you in that situation? Why did you accept his help? And blah, 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 blah. While all the while they keep berating me for not making connections, by the way. And then finally they say this that fucked me up, which say that, again, it was my mother who said that first. And she kind of like, said it in that Asian sort of voice and in that Asian sort of manner, saying that almost like an Asian sort of like matter of fact tone of voice. Like, we are from a different culture. You must have sent the wrong signal. Oh, I can't, bro. I can't. Oh, I can't. I really can't. And what fucked me up even more was that they would actually come over quite soon for some sort of admission ceremony to the profession, to my profession, which I'm still not really ready for, but it is what it is, right? So they were going to come for the celebration, whatever, the admission, the ceremony to the admission to my profession and all that crap. And what fucked me up even more was that in this foreign country, I have my aunt and uncle who have immigrated here. And when they were driving my parents away and driving me back into wherever I was living, this uncle of mine, which I was never really fond of, when he pried this story out of me saying like what happened and all that. I heard about this. I told him a bit about that and explained it to him. He actually told me too. Maybe you sent the wrong signal. Fucking hell. What the fuck? What the flying fuck? And you have to imagine being surrounded by these people with the same damned opinion, you know? And you have to remember previously, my mother actually said that I dressed like shit, and that's why the rationale was that I dressed like a pauper, and that was why the housemate saw that I had the need to steal his shit. That was the rationale, right? So now suddenly, like, and all the while, they always criticize you must not be, presenting yourself enough, aka attractive enough for people to want to hire you, which kind of bogged down on my self-confidence. And suddenly, when this happened, with their unhelpful advice of you must have given like the wrong signal, quote unquote. So, am I suddenly too attractive now that a guy suddenly thinks that what? So, that really fucked me up for good, and I never really recovered. And and the third story, I guess, would be how I finally just cut off all verbal communication, as in like spoken communication. Like if they want to call me, I will never pick up. Partly because it really like feels like a knife to my heart, knowing they say these things to me, and I know they will never admit it or apologize or acknowledge it. But second of all, it's just because I just couldn't handle it anymore, man. And it's even saying it now, it sounds so hard to believe because they're just words, bro. Shit, right? So what happened was that this phone call, this is the third story now, and this was what, oddly enough, this was a bit more tame, but this was where this was the phone call where I just, you know, said stop. And not to them, of course, I just wanted everything to stop. So what happened was that my father would randomly kind of ring me, and he claims is some sort of quote unquote chat sessions. Like he wants to have a little chat with me. But all it was, eventually, I found out, is that every single phone call was just another interrogation session about why do you not have a job yet, and unhelpful sort of advice from their end. It's kind of helpful when you think about it, but unhelpful given the context that all throughout my life you've never really, you only invested in work and you never really allowed me to socialize, never really were there to raise me, and suddenly you want me to be this certain way. And it's almost like things doesn't just happen just because it's it's like you can't scold something out of someone, you know. Just because you scold me to have more personality or more bravery or courage or independence doesn't mean I'll just get it. That's why I think it's unhelpful, right? So what happened was that he called me one of these little quote unquote chat sessions again, and again another interrogation sessions, and this time he added in like, are you going to visit your uncle? Again, this uncle is quite the character. He's always like the same, judgmental, like berating tone all the time, and it just makes me like, it feels like stepping on the eggshells, when I'm with my uncle and try to hang out with him. So I just never visited him or hanged out with him. And My father eventually was starting to kind of borderline demand that I visit him or something. This guy that this uncle who kind of communicated quite disrespectfully to me, honestly, and I don't even know he knows it. It's like this berating sort of tone. I'm just like done with it all. And this time, this phone call, my father keeps telling me how I need to visit him more often. Why aren't you visiting him and demanding an answer? I'm just like, ugh. I tried to explain to him, like borderline in tears, because I was so frustrated about, hey, he's just the things he said to me. It's just so like he's always acting so disrespectful and makes me feel so bad that I just don't want to go. And eventually he just got to the topic of water filters. And he started berating me and scolding me about how I'm not buying water filters and drinking from the tap. And I'm like, in my head, I was like, why are you calling? Why? Like, just why? And oddly enough, that was a phone call where I said like, no more. And eventually they'll miscall me like 30 times and I just didn't pick up because I just couldn't handle it anymore. And that was the phone call that did me in, right? It was so simple, but that was the phone call that did me in, right? And I'm just like, it's like people say you die out in the whimper and all that, and this is what I feel that was happening, you know. I just didn't want any more like unnecessary impact and unnecessary like just stress to what I have, on top of not being able to get a job, and that's on top of a lot of self-worthlessness sort of feeling. Excuse me. And it's just that particular phone call did me in. I'm sorry. It's kind of a pathetic sort of thing. Excuse me. Oh, I heard my phone ring, but that's just what happened, man. To make me go no contact when it comes to verbal communication. I'm sorry I got a bit low because I think the guy in the other room actually like tried to get my attention to shut up. I'm not sure. But this was what happened, right? Visiting my uncle and demanding me to be visiting this uncle is putting me a lot of stress. He's always saying that visit your fucking uncle. I'm like, he always makes me feel bad. He always talks to me in a way that makes me feel pressured and bad. And he just won't listen. And eventually, when it got to kind of like a messaging match in a way, because I won't talk to them with my mouth, with my voice, I messaged them, when you try to confront your parents about something, you don't do it directly or as best as you can, to be indirect. You have to go the roundabout way to tell them what you think. They won't understand anyway. And I told them, you just won't listen. I told them. And they were still, I don't know if they were acting or whatever, they still were clueless. What do we not listen? What do we not listen? They'll say. And that is why I just gave up communicating. Like, I just gave up trying to explain or tell them or anything. Eventually, I just go very, very low contact because that just, I don't want anything more to bog me down than what's already at hand. And again, these are a lot of emotional things driven by just words. But there were like words that finally came to a head when met with, some met with, the right conditions that made it just explode in a way, I guess. And this is kind of my story about what bad things my Asian parents have done to me in a way. And again, they're not even that bad, but it was like a slow progression. It's like CPTSD as contrasted to PTSD. It's not one big thing, but a progression and consistent progression of so many, I guess, small things. So if you're encountering these, verbal assaults, if you will, maybe you can relate to it somewhat. Maybe it'll help you somewhat, or maybe you were entertained by this. And hopefully this actually comes out, clear enough for you to listen to because it's exhausting to talk about this, man. It is. And again, maybe it's not as fucked up as I think it is, or maybe I'm actually like trying to subconsciously suppress this by thinking it's not that bad, you know, which happens a lot, which kind of haunts me every single day. But this is kind of like a progression, sort of, recording, depicting the progression of why I just stopped talking to my parents when it comes to, voice to voice, because I can imagine if I hear their voice and knowing what they said to me, what they've done to me, it just probably will break my heart anew. And that is why I just like, no more. And again, this recording is kind of like the story of why I stopped talking to my parents when it comes to voice to voice communication. Hope you enjoyed or not. This is kind of like a personal little diary and journal anyway. So, yeah, if you have anything to say, you can't really say it to my face, but yeah, I would love some interaction if you have any. Probably I'll just say I'm sorry for you because probably I'm genuinely am. There's not much we can do online, honestly, but relate to each other and find similar voices to know that we're not crazy. So again, this may be a hindsight 2020. When I listen back to this one day, I'll be like, hey, that was fucked up or something like that, right? So yeah, this concludes my recording and all that. Try to have a nice day, nice week, nice year, nice life, and a nice month because I missed out on that. See ya.